All right, WNOV family, this is Will Martin, and you're listening to The Difference. And we have a special show for you today to talk about something very important. Jermaine, what do you think about your money?
I like it.
You like your money?
Yeah.
Would you like to have more of your money?
Oh yeah, I would like to.
Okay, that's good. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the government and the amount of money the government took from you,
Oh.
and what are they doing with it.
Uh-oh.
That's today's show.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So we're going to get a little chance to have that conversation. And I reached out to my friends at the Maciver Institute. That is, and I'm going to make sure that I get this exactly right because I got the mission statement right in my hand. The John K. Maciver Institute for Public Policy. And it's a Wisconsin-based think tank that promotes free markets, individual freedom, personal responsibility, and limited government. All four of those are my favorites. So, and we were going to have Annette Olson here, who's the executive director as well, but she couldn't make it. So I made sure that say hello for her. But we do have Bill Osmulski, who is here and is a staffer with the Institute, and he has written on the budget as well. So welcome to the studio.
Hi, Will. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, sorry Annette couldn't make it, so you're stuck with me.
Oh, no, not stuck at all. Not stuck at all. But boy, I see Annette a fair amount. Never too much, but a fair amount. I get a chance to see her.
Well, I'm really glad I could be on the show. I've been with Maciver for 16 years, so like right at the beginning. And that's when Maciver was founded. And I just want to really just take a quick step to just explain to people what a free market think tank is, because nobody really understands.
Yeah, what is that?
So first of all, free markets. What's free markets? Well, it's basically an economic principle that people on the right believe in. It's essentially less government involved in our lives, the better we are off. So put it another way, when there's a problem, if you're on the left, you want the government to jump in and solve it. If you're on the right, you want the government to get out of the way and let anyone else solve it. And generally, you suspect government probably created the problem in the first place.
Certainly complicates it. As we were talking about some other issues out there. So given that, and so you told me earlier you're originally from Indiana, but you got here by way of coming to college. So you came to college right here in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I went to Marquette, started in 1997. Lived in Avenues West for many years. I lived on Highland Avenue, so maybe that's the connection. But after that, got a job. After I graduated, I got a job with CBS 58 here in town. For people that have been around for a while, I worked with Paul Piaskuski and Rock Rote. I was in the sports department, so like Rock Rote was a mentor of mine, and worked there for a few years. And then I decided, it's time for me to actually become a reporter and actually, start figuring this stuff out on my own. Went to Eau Claire for a couple years, went to Madison for a year, then fell in with the Maciver Institute.
Right. It's a huge shift, though. So did you go to college for journalism?
Yeah, broadcast journalism.
Okay. And so you shifted all the way out of journalism into public policy. So how does that even happen?
Well, it's you have to have the same level of inquisitiveness to be successful in each. So, as a reporter, I kind of gravitated towards investigative journalism, just really trying to get behind the story to figure out what was really going on. And that translated really well into a think tank where, I'm still making videos. I'm still doing radio reports and writing a lot and really investigating a lot of different issues. Sometimes there's a problem that we identify in society or in the government in Wisconsin, and we want to explore, okay, what's going on here? How should government actually be approaching this problem? And so I write about that and, push it all out through all the multimedia channels we have now. Other times government's trying to do something and we're like, wait a minute, hold the brakes. Let's see, is this actually an okay idea, or, what's this actually going to do? And that's kind of...
And should the government be the one doing it?
Exactly. So, that's kind of like the perspective that we bring when we're starting to look at things like the state budget, for example.
Yeah. I think, the reason I asked Jermaine about his money is because really, if you come to Milwaukee, there are a lot of people who, are struggling, especially after all the inflation that we've been through. And just all the disruption that happened during COVID. And we've said it a million times on this show that, 40% of Black-owned businesses failed during the COVID period because they were forced to close. And unlike those big box stores where they were able to stay open, these folks in these neighborhoods, and we still to this day have many a storefront that's empty, where there had been a business there before. So there's long-term impacts for the government stepping in and making these decisions at one point in time that are going to have long-ranging implications for this community and then many others.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that's started a business knows all the different ways that government is coming at you. I mean, from licensing to during COVID when you had they actually literally shut you down,
Mhm.
all the tax compliance that you have to go through. I mean, it takes a lot. There's a reason why, a lot of businesses seem to have so many administrative people is trying to sort through all that stuff.
Right. It's a huge expense. And I think on top of it, so many of our people in Milwaukee are struggling anyway because, again, the inflation. But people don't really think about the inflation in terms of what the government's spending and how much of their money is actually part of that equation. So,
Yeah, and so we spend a lot of time on the state budget. Milwaukee's always kind of like its own little piece of the puzzle because
Mhm.
Milwaukee is what's classified as a class 1 city, and that just means big city, and there's only one in Wisconsin.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that happen in Milwaukee, like just the way Milwaukee manages its money, not well. But when they start asking for special favors from the state government, like, hey, we want to increase our city sales tax by 2%.
Right.
That's all. The rest of the state is downstream. It happens in Milwaukee first, and then you start to see other cities saying, hey, if they get it, we want it too.
Mhm.
So, one quick aside. So like right now there's a talk about allowing street light cameras
Right.
in Milwaukee.
That's right.
It would only be only in class 1 cities, so only in Milwaukee. But that if Milwaukee gets those speeding ticket cameras, they're going to be all over the state. So that's why what happens in Milwaukee is so important to everyone else.
It's funny you bring this up because Jermaine and I and Debo, we all three had a conversation last week with Senator Corey Tomczyk, the transportation committee chair, and this was one of the very topics were those red light cameras, but because in Milwaukee there are so many people who end up not only speeding in excess through these corridors, but they're also then speeding through the red lights. And we've had a number of people who've either been injured or killed as a result. Jermaine's son was one example of somebody who got hit from a high-speed reckless driving situation.
Yeah.
So there are just so many people who've experienced these things. And so we had a lot of conversation around, what are the unintended consequences too? So Jermaine had a number of questions about how are we going to make sure that this only impacts people who are really in the wrong? How to make sure that people who, whose cars have been stolen or other things have happened, they don't end up having their car impounded or other, other things happening.
That's a great point because the people that are running red lights aren't exactly going to be opening the mail and sending in checks at City Hall.
Correct. I think that's almost exactly what. that's why I'm bringing him up because this is exactly part of. But it's again that whole idea of government's attempting to solve a problem. People are bringing up an issue. It's a legitimate problem to be addressed. It's not always clear that government has the tools to fix, and too often the solution sometimes impacts actually the more honest, hardworking folks, and sometimes affects much less the people who are out there doing the speeding, particularly if they're stealing cars in the process of getting out there to do it.
It's a great example too of how different types of lawmakers, policymakers, how they have different motivations and sometimes they intersect. So like with red light cameras, you have Republicans that want to, sound tough on crime. So they want those cameras to cut down on the crime. And then you have Democrats in the city of Milwaukee that are thinking, hey, we can get some money out of this. So, both sides are lining up like to get something like that done. And is it going to have any positive impact? Well, it's probably not going to have any impact on, people stealing cars and running red lights, really. And the city might start counting on money that is never going to materialize.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, that's an example where, as we understood from the interview last week, that the cameras and et cetera will have to be purchased by the city. That the state's not stepping in to provide any financial assistance in that regard. It's really still going to be a Milwaukee expense. The state legislature and the governor, if he signs, would simply be allowing and as you could say, Milwaukee specifically, at least at the beginning, to be able to do this. So I think it's a great example of how we start trying to figure out a thing, but again, it doesn't always fit neatly that only the bad guys are going to end up with having to deal with this. I think this is what the 14th time I've said Jermaine's name, but I think as Jermaine talked about is even, if your car gets stolen or if you end up inadvertently being misidentified, you've got to be the one to take off work. You've got to be the one to go down to court. You've got to be the one to actually, confront this issue and dispute it.
Yeah. I know this firsthand, believe it or not. When I lived on Wells Streets.
Okay.
One winter, fresh snowfall covered up everyone's parking stickers. They came, they towed my car right out of my apartment parking lot because, they don't stick around in those neighborhoods to check very well. So yeah, they hauled it all the way up to the north side. And,
wow.
I had to call into work. So I had to take the bus all the way to the north side. And I saw the kinds of people that get caught up in that. Everyone in the waiting room just trying to get their cars back. So,
right. And there's not much you can do, right?
There's no alternative. I mean, you have no recourse. You have to just deal with what you've been dealt. And yeah, it's a tough situation.
I think, this is all a long conversation of why free market and smaller government, limited government is important because of the way that real world impacts happen in terms of the lives of folks, especially people who have limited means, are working hard every day and are now having to take time off to figure out how do I get back what little I have, like the car I absolutely need because, it's been towed or, or in this case, it's been misidentified as being involved or God forbid somebody's stolen my car and gone out and hurt somebody or my car's been totaled in the process.
And for all the ways that government tries to insert itself into our lives, when you're talking about people like in those life situations, it's incredible how little support they actually have for real world problems that they're dealing with, despite the massive amounts of money that government is just pouring into trying to solve these problems. And, as I write repeatedly at Maciver, I feel like the way that government tries to solve these problems not only doesn't solve the problems, but it makes things harder for everyone else.
Well, I think especially when we talk about, we've got a full-time government at multiple levels, all of them taxing and all of them looking for new problems to solve. There's only so much money that people have.
Yeah. I mean, look at, the city of Milwaukee, we can talk about the state in a moment, but, city of Milwaukee, it got a great deal from the state a couple years ago where they said, hey, our pension, we owe a lot of money for these pensions. This is going to drag us under unless you let us increase taxes by 2% on everybody. And the state let them do it, and it didn't solve anything. The city of Milwaukee is facing $100 million shortfall again this year.
Right. And the county had similar issues, and they were. So you're looking at the county taxes went up, the city taxes went up. Yeah. That's not even talking about the $250 million that the school district also went up for its last referendum.
I don't know what you guys get out of it because, they charge you fees for everything in the city. And, they're talking about increasing those like another 4% for next year to try to fix this budget gap. And you look at the real world impact that, all those, $10 here, $20 there has on you. And you look at the impact on the city, it's like, you guys have a $2 billion budget and all of these things that you're jacking up on us, that's going to bring in $40 million. That's like a fraction of your problem there, but you're making things a lot harder on us in the meantime.
Well, and I think too, it's also, it has a business impact on whether or not businesses want to locate in the city, right? Because, the sales tax issue that came up, there were counties that surround Milwaukee saying, hey, if you don't like that new sales tax rate inside the city or the county, you can always come up or come down, because ours is lower.
Yeah, I'm surprised that more people don't try to poach businesses out of Milwaukee. Like if I were Washington County or Waukesha, I'd be saying, hey, you don't want to deal with that stuff going on there? Hey, we've got a great lot, vacant lot here that you can build your factory in just out of town.
Right. And of course, then that exacerbates more the issue of like having jobs here. Again, so it just spirals, and the people who have the least are the ones who end up really having to pay the brunt of this because of these policies. So, I'm really intrigued when we talk about the state budget, a couple of things that I have, just been really frustrated by is when Governor Walker left office, the budget was $76 billion. And I thought it was too much then.
Yeah.
It's now, let's call it 6.5 years later, 111.2 billion just in the straight money. And we're not even talking about like getting into the capital budget.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's even more there.
Yeah. So one of the things with the state budget is it always grows. It never shrinks. This last year, and it depends on where it depends on where you look. 111 billion dollars. I think I count more like 114 billion dollars. But again, it's very hard to find consistent sources on this, which is why you should just go to MacIverInstitute.com and see what we write about it.
Right.
But the last state budget. So these are 2-year documents. So they go for 2 years. The last state budget was about $99 billion. This one's like around 114. So that's a 15% increase. Easy math. That was the largest increase that I've been able to identify from one budget to the next ever. And I went back, to 25 years trying to find a similar increase like that. So that's, historic increase. And I mean, you've got, even with a Democrat governor and a Republican legislature, that was a lot more than I thought. Like I was expecting, like bad years, typically it'll go up 5%. That's what I was expecting this year. So I'm not very happy with the state budget in any regard. And I've written a lot about it. I've probably upset a lot of people by it, but you can't really argue with math.
Well, one of the things I'm trying to do with this show often is to educate people about what's happening and give people another perspective about it. I think it's important for folks to understand that even if you take what the state's number is, so they say 111.2 billion is this biennium, right? So even if you take their number, that's a 46% increase since Governor Walker left office 6.5 years ago. My point is, take-home pay for the average Milwaukeean has not increased anywhere remotely close to 46%.
Yeah.
So you're actually going to get taxed especially after all this inflation and other competing needs that you have. Utility prices are up. I think you all have
second highest utility rates in the Midwest.
Right. So you get utility rates that are up. The inflation rates that are up, including food, and in some cases we've seen 30% increases in rents.
Yep.
Since 2018. There are a lot of things, a lot of pressures on families, and yet the state budget has gone up 46%. And when you look at the per capita expense, the per person expenditure for the state budget, that's gone up itself. We're now, our per person expenditure is higher by some estimates than half the country.
Yeah. So the big thing here is government is really good at taking care of itself. When Governor Walker first came in office, it used to be a big deal. Nobody made six figures in state government. Like the governor made, I can't remember, like 130, 140, and there was like an unspoken rule. Nobody gets to make more than the governor. After his labor reforms, it was actually incredible, for all of the protesting and mass from state workers. They couldn't imagine how much they would be making today. Like the number of six-figure salaries throughout state government is incredible. County jobs, I'll look at county jobs around the state, like $80,000 is nothing for a county job anymore. So yeah, government is real. And the whole controversy here in Milwaukee, after they got that new sales tax, huge raises got pushed through for everybody in the city government.
Double-digit.
Yeah.
Double-digit raises. I mean, again, people who are struggling every day are now helping contribute toward city officials being paid double-digit increases. And I think a lot of people just don't know that this is where their money's going.
That's right. And so it's essentially a feeding frenzy at all levels of government at the taxpayer's expense.
Yeah. And of course, if you're getting taxed, it's not like different people are getting taxed for the city versus the county versus the state. If you're in the area, you're paying all of this.
That's right.
And so, but the idea that we are a state of under 6 million people, and the idea that we're spending 46% more, and we're spending more than per capita that, more per capita than Michigan does, more per capita than Ohio does, more per capita than Pennsylvania does. Illinois is broke.
Hmm.
Illinois is broke, and we spend more money than Illinois. So just to get it through is like, wait, a state of 13 million people to the south of us, they spend less on government, and they're already broke. We're spending more than they do.
Yeah, we're working really hard to catch up to them.
Exactly. So I just think that it's important for people to understand what's really happening out here. When people start to think about, well, why don't I have more take-home pay? A lot of times it's this. It's all these other things that have to get paid before you ever touch the check.
Yeah. One of the big initiatives that we have at Maciver right now, we're calling it "It's Not Working."
Mm-hmm.
So when those labor reforms first went into place, when Walker was in office, we had this big campaign called "It's Working," and we went around the state and we talked to all kinds of like local lawmakers, local officials,
Mm-hmm.
local small businesses, just regular people who were suddenly noticing like the relief of pressure on them.
Yeah.
Local budgets were suddenly balanced, and that helped the businesses, it helped the people. And so we did all kinds of stories based off of that. Today, something's not working.
Wow. We're going to come back and talk
Sure.
about what's not working right after this break. All right, WNOV family, you're listening to Will Martin, and this is The Difference. And we are having a conversation about taxation and budgets. The big deal about public budgets, whether it's the state budget, the city budget, is it's your money. When we ask for these government programs, a lot of times, people don't really want to talk to you about the fact that you're having to pay it to get the quote unquote benefit from, again, these government programs. The money's coming from somewhere. The point is, it's really coming from all of us in the process. We were just talking about, the budget beforehand, and this idea that, we were just also talking about surplus.
Mhm.
And surplus is a nice government way of saying that they have charged you enough tax that the government's making money off of its people.
That's right. So one thing with budgets that politicians really struggle with is, a budget is about priorities. And, anyone that's put together a household budget knows, even if you don't formalize and write it down, that you're making decisions every day like, hey, I can't afford this, or, so we can't get that at the grocery store. We got to pick something else. Government doesn't really like to do that. Everything's a priority to government. So the way these budgets just kind of build off of one another is they never say, well, that this one program has served its purpose, let's cut that one off and spend that money somewhere else in the next budget. No, they live forever.
And there are employees at the state
That's right.
that are responsible for these programs.
That's right. And
So you're touching people's jobs.
oh gosh, yeah.
Even if the program's not benefiting the people, you're touching somebody who has a really healthy pension coming from the state.
And then you go one step further than that, and a lot of the government's money goes to vendors and nonprofits who also have a strong interest in keeping that money flowing because it's their jobs.
Yeah. And when we say it's government money, it's really our money that the government took.
That's right. And so during COVID, the federal government just flushed all states, local governments with cash. So they were supposed to spend that money on really specific things, one-time expenses, put up your plexiglass barriers and get some more hand sanitizer.
Right.
They didn't do that. They used that to to plug all these holes in their operational budgets. It became ongoing permanent spending for them.
Yeah.
So when that money ran out because we aren't getting COVID money anymore, they had to find other ways. They suddenly had all these budget gaps.
Right. There's always another way to do this, right? You could always cut the programs.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And I think the theory is, we don't cut these because they're so vital to people's lives. When you really find out, first of all, not everything that the government's spending on is a program.
Mm-hmm.
Not every program is actually benefiting people. A great example that I have just continued to rail against is state government has at least 2.5 million square feet of office space. Yet a whole lot of people who work for the state are now working from home. So we are actually paying for largely empty buildings, and we're paying utilities, maintenance, and insurance on largely empty buildings. I think anybody, whether you are from the left, the right, the center, nobody likes the idea of they're actually getting charged taxes for empty buildings.
What's funny about that, though, is when you start talking about the politicians on the right, left, and middle, they've all got a reason why those buildings need to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on the right, well, those state workers should be coming into the office and working. If you're on the left, you don't want to ever divest anything from the government. So keep those buildings up, even if they're empty. So,
yeah. So but it strikes me again, these people who are struggling to make ends meet, that's just one more expense for them that if you'd let them have their money back, they could actually afford groceries after COVID. They could actually afford the rent that's gone up after COVID. But it's hard to do when you watch the government actually, and it's so hard to track what the government's actually spending your money on, because the budget documents are so huge and it's so convoluted as to get to where the document is, and then to actually understand what they're actually spending the money on.
Yeah. So during this budget cycle, and I've been doing this, for 16 years, I started to really pay attention to the processes of how the budget was written. So, when a lawmaker says, yeah, put that in the budget, who's actually, pulling out the spreadsheet and, writing those numbers into the cells? Well, one of the discoveries I made this year was, first of all, the state doesn't have a spreadsheet of the budget. It's all like individual tables spread out across all kinds of different documents. So that was really shocking to me. And if you want to compare us to Illinois, Illinois has their entire budget on a spreadsheet that anybody can download right off their website. So that to me is like a big point for improvement. When it comes to programs, like what is the state actually?
Okay, before you leave that point, I just think it's so important. The idea that we have, this would be like you trying to figure out how I'm going to make my household budget work when I've got $5 under the mattress over here, $12 over here in this drawer, another
pile of receipts,
and then some more over at my neighbor's place and something under the car. You can't have all this money and all these bills that are all going to be placed all over. Eventually you're not going to add up correctly.
So, and when you're going through, when you're in school, like accounting class or whatever, I mean, the value of a spreadsheet is you have a spreadsheet on the computer in front of you, you start playing with it. You start, what do we spend the most money on? Let's filter that down. Let's see how many programs are,
Right.
so you start to, as a policymaker, as a lawmaker, as someone writing the budget, this is your first opportunity to really wrap your head around the budget and explore the data and figure out what are we spending our money on.
And have to wrestle with how much is this total?
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of families, to the extent that they don't budget, don't have an idea of how much they're really spending on a monthly, on a weekly, on an annual basis. This whole idea of having sort of one universal place where all of the expenses go, I think in part we don't do it because we don't want to have to grapple with how much are we actually spending.
So I'll tell you, like, no matter how disorganized your household expenses might be, you still expect the government to have their act together.
Right. Because you're paying somebody, as you said, 6 figures to get it together.
And so I think a lot of people in your audience would be horrified to think that, for those of you out there that struggle, keeping track of all this stuff in your household, you're probably horrified to realize that the state has just as much trouble keeping it straight.
Absolutely. And so this idea, and the other thing I think that it allows the state to get away with is when you've got multiple programs that are all for the same thing, and I've talked about this for years now, we've got in some cases 5 agencies that all do very similar things, if not the same. For economic development, this idea that they're going to bring jobs, they're going to bring businesses, etc. 5 different agencies that are doing this. 5 different. So when you get ready to call somebody, well, you can't find the right person because they're across 5 different agencies. But nobody, because we don't put them all in one universal spreadsheet, we're not looking at the fact that, hey, we got all these different entities that are all authorized to do very similar, if not the same thing.
The state budget is very weird also, and just like its approach to things. Like when you're putting together your home budget, you're looking at your expenses. Okay, how much does cable cost each month for me? What does this cost and that?
Like gas money.
Yeah.
Right. Just making sure you got enough to get back and forth.
The state doesn't really look at it that way. They figure, okay, I'm getting $50 from the federal government for this. I'm getting $20 for that. They don't actually look at what anything costs. They just look at how much they're getting for it from other sources. So,
and of course, now we have to keep doing it because if the federal government gives us money, well, we got to take it.
Yeah, exactly. They never leave money on the table.
Yeah. Now, just so people in the audience know, it is not like federal government sends us free money by no stretch of the imagination. When they send the money, there are strings on it, just like there's state strings to the local government. If they send us money, we have to often match that money. So there's no free money from Washington, D.C., which, by the way, we pay those too.
Yeah.
So that money that comes, we often have to match it here, which still means people in Wisconsin are having to shell out.
Yeah. And it's, when we talk about what are they spending the money on too, like one of the other discoveries I made was there's no comprehensive list of all the programs and projects that the state is spending money on. Every few months we'll get a tip or we'll start looking at something and we'll stumble on some program and then we'll realize this thing has never been mentioned in any budget document going back decades. So like we found one program that was at least 50 years old. We found another one that had been going on at least since the 80s. And again, I mean, these programs have been continuing on over the decades. Never, I don't think any lawmaker ever knew they existed.
Well, I think this is where Annette would be saying zero-based budgeting. And zero-based budgeting is basically like you go back to zero. You start from the beginning and begin to think about what do I need to spend money on?
That's
and
right.
How much money do I need to do the things that are real priorities? Everything can't be a priority.
Yeah. So when you're doing zero-based budgeting, it's one method of writing a budget where essentially you start with a sheet of paper with all of your requirements that you need to all your expenses, and you put zero next to all of them, and you determine exactly how much you're going to be spending on them in total. The way the state does budgeting is they also start with a blank sheet of paper with no numbers on it, and it's just how much more do you want to give each of these this year more than you gave last year.
Right. So it's really a false zero, because it's really based on what we were already spending, and the assumption is what we were spending must be good for somebody, so we're just going to keep doing that and add to it.
That's right. So like if you were to look at, if a regular person were to like open up state budget documents, you would see something like the dairy inspection program, $0. And you're thinking, wait, what do you mean the state's not spending $0 on this? No, that just means that they aren't spending any more on it than they are last time. They might be spending, $50 million on it, but the budget documents they're showing you just say zero because we're still spending $50 million on it.
So it's this has been one of the things that I have really pushed for is, I think it's a dirty secret, right? That every time we vote for a new governor, the governor comes in and tells you what's wrong with the last governor. And they tell you, oh, they did it wrong. They did it all wrong. But I'm going to come in, I'm going to do it all right. And here are all the initiatives I'm going to do. Well, all those initiatives cost money. What they don't tell you is the governor gets elected and the lieutenant governor gets elected in November. And this will happen next year for us, right? So we're going to have an election in November, beginning of November. Then that governor's got to figure out who's going to serve in the cabinet, fill all these positions, got to figure out. In addition to that, they have to start thinking about the budget, because very quickly you go from that November win. By December, you have to figure out who's going with you. You have to also start that budget process, because by the time you get in January, you have to start thinking about what am I going to send to the legislature to say, hey, these are my priorities and here's how much it's going to cost. Well, you just got in office. So, of course, if you don't understand how it works already, the only way it happens is you just pile on everything else that's already been spent. So you don't know that there were 4 or 5 or 16 other programs that do exactly what your priority is. You don't know that we're going to continue to spend money on those. And you don't know that, our families are getting tasked with all this additional spending and not seeing any benefit oftentimes from it. And so that's where I really think there's an enormous opportunity to get a new governor and lieutenant governor that would understand better what's actually in that mix much earlier, so that you could actually put forth a budget that would really actually cut the size of state government.
Yeah, because when the governor makes his budget address in February, you're right. It's just adding to the pile. It's I want to spend, $100 million on this and $2 billion on that,
and everybody claps for the new stuff because it's great.
He never says I want to cut this by $2 billion and that by $3 billion. But that is the approach that you have to take, especially with this what we call incremental budgeting, where it's just throwing more cash on top of the pile.
But everybody, I think the traditional thing in our country is to complain that if you cut something, you're taking something vital from somebody. And someone's going to die, some business is going to shut down, whatever it is, it's absolutely essential that we keep doing that program.
Yeah, this can become like a really important issue to me is stakeholder groups, because no matter how small a state program is, there's always going to be a stakeholder groups. It might be 5 people, but you can guarantee that once they start having budget public hearings on the budget throughout the state, those 5 people are going to show up to every location and say how important this program is. And so that's what these lawmakers are hearing when they hear from the public is just everybody that has something to lose if you cut the budget. It's never people like one of the politicians on the floor was saying how, we were in 4 different communities across the state. We've heard from hundreds of people during the budget hearings. Nobody ever said, want you to cut taxes. They just hear from the people that want more. They don't want people that want less.
Because again, nobody's calling Jermaine to say, hey, do you want to come to this hearing so that you can actually tell these people how hard it is to live with all this money coming out of your check? The vast majority, I think the silent majority of folks who have got to work every day and they're trying to figure out how do I go pick up, I don't know why today I just keep talking Fort Jermaine, but he's
I'll
got a
take it.
grandson. What your grandson's 8,
Yeah,
right?
grandson's eight.
You are a musician.
Yes, sir.
You also work here.
Yeah.
So you are getting gigs. You're
Yeah.
also then coming here.
Yeah.
So you got all these different things you're doing.
Yeah.
Then sometimes you got to make sure that because your daughter maybe isn't able to pick up the grandson, you got to go pick up the grandson instead. I just think there's so many things in real life that happen for the vast majority of people, especially if you are not one of these 6-figure people. If you don't have that kind of money, you don't have the luxury of knowing that there's a budget hearing happening. You don't have the luxury of being able to just go hang out with some legislators. And of course, they don't hear from anybody about cutting stuff because everybody who really needs them to cut doesn't have the time to be bothered.
Right.
You know, to me, I think it's a scam.
Well, so like that scenario that you just laid out there too. You know, what you really need is a situation where you're able to make a living off of one job.
Mm-hmm.
The government hears all that and it's like, oh, you need a personal van service to pick up your grandkids. So then they'll dump a bunch of money into a program to address that requirement.
Oh, well, we got one better because Jermaine and I talked about. Jermaine, you were becoming a much
strong,
more. You are really like a big part of this show today. Remember that we talked before about MPS went out and they used COVID money to buy 20 vans.
Yeah.
20 vans. Okay. For $1.2 million, the vans sat empty and unused for a year. We're now on year 2 of those vans being around, still not being used.
Yeah,
right?
that's a typical government program.
Exactly. And so when you say, oh, let's dump some more, this is except for the vans have never moved. So he's still got to figure out how to go pick up his 8-year-old grandson.
And they're picking his pocket to pay the $1.2 million.
And that's why I just think it's a scam, because people are being told that these programs are really benefiting them, and it's this boogeyman that's trying to take it away from you. When no, you never got anything from this to begin with except a bill.
That's right. But the people that, sold the vans, or the people that are getting paid to drive the vans, they would come up to any public hearing and say how important this service is.
I'm sure it was very important, whoever got a chance to sell the 20 vans.
That's right.
Okay, well, we're going to have a break, and we'll come right back right after this. All right, WNOV family, this is Will Martin, and you're listening to The Difference. And my guest today is Bill Osmulski, who is from the Maciver Institute, talking about freedom, free markets, limited government, and basically how to either make sure your money stays in your pocket or you get it back.
So yeah, and I mentioned earlier this big initiative we've got right now called "It's Not Working," and this is a project where we're really exploring why is the cost of living spiraling out of control, and we're looking at six very specific areas, like why aren't your wages going up? Why is housing so expensive? Daycare, healthcare, taxes and spending. Why are these things all out of control? And obviously, the common thread as well, government is driving the costs. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to explain real quick that government spends all this money on welfare, and that's money that's direct, whatever, that money's gone. It's, if you aren't on welfare, who cares? If you're a taxpayer, you look at it's like, well, it's in the grand scheme of things, how much is that really? Big drop in
And
the
most
pocket.
people in Wisconsin, I think generally in America, want to help people.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not that we're arguing against the welfare program. It's just a lot of the money's going somewhere else.
Well, and one of the themes that we've really identified here is the way that government administers these programs, has them structured. They have cost controls in place. So like if they're giving subsidies to daycares, for example, the daycares can't charge through the roof. They say, hey, you can only charge, if you're going to get government subsidies, you can't charge more than, say, $1,000 a month per kid. Well, the daycares here, they're like, oh, we can charge $1,000 a month. So they all charge that. So by government giving a little bit of money in these subsidy programs, what it ends up doing is it drives up the cost for everyone. So if you're on the welfare program, hey, good for you. If you're not on the welfare program, you have to pay for all this stuff yourself.
So we're talking about working poor folks that
That's right.
are working blue collar. They're trying to make ends meet. They don't they make too much to qualify for what the government subsidy would be, but they're still not going to be able to get a discount on that.
That's right. And the reason why these things are so expensive in this first place is because of the way the government has incentivized whole industries to raise these prices. That's why housing is so expensive, because the federal government says, oh, an average apartment in Milwaukee is $1,400. So we will subsidize people that are on this program up to $1,400 a month. So all the landlords say, well, if that's what the government says we can charge, that's the new price floor. Every apartment is going to be $1,400 minimum.
Right. So especially if those vouchers come out, and again, people think, hey, this is really great. I want to help somebody who's homeless get a home. Awesome. You want to help somebody who's maybe maybe at risk of losing their home. Hey, let's step in. Awesome. But the way that the government does it, once they start setting what the pricing is going to be, that's the pricing for everything.
That's right. That is anti-free market. So we are identifying this as a major problem across all kinds of different areas in your life. All these important areas, the expenses that the essentials.
Yeah. And we want to make sure that people can get childcare. I mean, it's an essential piece of today. We want to make sure Jermaine's grandkid out there has got a safe place to be, and that somebody's picking him up, and that we actually know who's picking him up.
That's right. But you don't want it so that, all of a sudden, calling a van to pick up your kid, paying for yourself, the price has gone through the roof.
Right. You
want to talk about my military experience, but I've got a great transition here.
Okay.
So anybody that's been in the military is familiar with the concept of basic allowance for housing. That's where, you're a soldier, you make, $5,000 a month, but the government gives you another $1,000 to pay for your apartment off base. Anyone that's ever been in that situation knows that all the landlords around the base know exactly how much you're getting, and they set their rent accordingly. So if you're talking about, a bunch of bachelor second lieutenants that are getting $1,000 a month, the landlords have it set so that, a room costs you $1,000 a month. So you've seen this concept actually in practice. But yeah, as Will and I were talking, I'm in the National Guard. I've been in the Wisconsin National Guard for 18 years.
Yeah, I was really thinking it'd be great to have somebody in from the National Guard, but you just finished telling me, hey, because the government shut down, we can't really get somebody right now to do that, so we'll have to wait till the government opens up again.
That's right. As soon as the recruiting and retention battalion is up running full speed, I'll be in there saying, hey, you need to go on Will Martin's show on WNOV.
There you go. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, as we get a little closer on this, because I know we're getting, Jermaine won't let me go over. Yeah, you won't let me go over, right? So as we wrap this up, what do working folks do? I mean, people who listen to this station are largely working a job or more than one job,
Yeah.
or they're retired and they worked one or more jobs themselves throughout their lives. For folks who have just been trying to make ends meet and to do their thing and to make it work, what do they do to make sure that they don't continue to get ripped off by all these government programs that are not really serving ultimately at the end of the day the person that we had hoped that we're going to help?
Yeah, I mean, very. I understand that issue. I mean, at Maciver, we don't tell the lawmakers what to do. We expose what's going on. We talk to people about it, and the idea is we build pressure on policymakers, on lawmakers to actually make changes for the better. Okay. So by going to MacIverInstitute.com, by reading our stuff,
wait, slow that down. Maciver
Institute.com.
Okay. All right. Maciver. Okay. Now there's a bazillion different ways I can spell Maciver. Which way do you want us to spell it?
MACIVER Institute.com.
All one word.
Or you can Google it. It'll come right
Okay.
up.
All right.
But yeah, you could see like the types of research that we're doing. We write these as news reports so anyone can read them. And, just start opening your eyes to how government is actually causing your cost of living to spiral out of control. It's not helping address the situation. Everything it's doing is making things worse.
And as you said, it's not working.
It's not working. And once you understand how it's not working, you'll be able to articulate that to your lawmakers and to other people in your lives.
Beautiful.
And make a change.
Okay. Well, Jermaine's making us leave. So it's another week down. For everybody who listened, thanks and peace out.